This story happened about 11 years ago. I was a senior in high school at the time, but it is the single most mind-boggling thing that I have ever experienced. It's also important to note that it happened in mid-December. I am from Minnesota, and the winters here get cold at night. Like if you get stuck outside, you will die kind of cold. That plus the snowfall makes everything dead silent. You can hear anything and everything inside the house and even immediately outside of it. Well, my best friend and I were hanging out in my family's walkout basement, just having a boring winter night playing video games. We were also the only ones home. The reason it was just us is because my mother went from work straight to a bar to grab a few drinks with coworkers, so me and my friend thought it would be a good idea to break into the family wine and live a little. As we were sitting there opening up the first bottle, I heard the door to the garage open and slammed shut. I immediately go, "Oh shit," and start looking for places to hide the bottle. My friend then says, "I thought you said your mom was supposed to be out all night?" "She was," I replied. I then heard a few heavy stomps and heard my mother yell out, "Kiddo? Anyone home?" I yell back up the stairs, "Yup. Just hanging out in the basement." I hear a few more steps move from the garage door towards the stairs and she yells out again, "Can you come help me with something? I need you up here." I reply back while frantically trying to find a good place to hide the wine bottle, "Yup. Give me just a minute." Then there was silence for about 20 seconds. "Anyone down there with you?" She yelled back in a more concerned, serious tone, in a voice that was slightly off of my mother's. This was the first thing that told me something wasn't right. Our family never cared if anyone was over, as our house was a very open house to all family and friends, and the voice, it was just wrong. Like it sounded like my mother's, but it was missing something that I couldn't put my finger on. Weirded out, I replied back, "Just Michael." After I yelled that back to her, I found a good place to hide the bottle and began walking up the steps to the next level. Now, as I was walking up the steps, I couldn't help but feel the overbearing silence of the house, and the slight electric twinge that something isn't right. When I got to the top of the steps, I looked over to where the door to the garage is and also the kitchen right next to it, and it's black, pitch black. All of the lights were off, and there was no moonlight shining through any windows. I walked over to the kitchen yelling out, "Mom, where are you?" There was no reply, just silence and darkness. I feel the electric twinge turn into full needles, and my adrenaline kicking in full force. I have to get out of here as fast as possible. My mother was not home. I run back down the stairs grabbing my coat along the way. "What's wrong?" Michael says, "My mom's not home." I reply as fast as I can, looking for my truck keys. "What do you mean? You were just talking with her?" I could see the confusion in his face. "There's no one home. We need to leave now." I took a few steps towards the back door that opens up to the yard, and then I see my dog shaking on the couch, and my cat growling behind it. I couldn't leave them. I just knew that if we left, something would happen. "Are we leaving?" Michael said, still confused as all hell. "No, I can't leave them here alone. Something is really off. I'm going to call my mom and figure this out." I pull out my phone and call my mom. She picks up immediately, "Kiddo? What's going on?" She answers, "Mom, were you just home? I heard you yelling for me from the second level, and when I went up you weren't there." I said frantically, hoping that she was playing a joke. "No, I'm just leaving the bar. I wasn't feeling very well. Are you okay?" "What do you mean you heard me?" I fill her in on the whole story and she rushes home. Michael and I stayed in the basement with the animals until she got home, but before she did you could hear something upstairs, not walking or sitting on things, but a pressure in the air, like a black hole was slowly moving from one room to the next, and the word that I would instinctively describe it as is hungry. When she got home you could feel the thing leave just as quick as it came, like an overbearing predatory presence had just flown away. We still have never figured out what the hell was going on, and this is just one story of many unexplainable things that have happened to us, but this is the easiest to write down, and one that I was happy to have a witness. My mother has passed away now, and I have moved away to Nevada, but whenever I go back to Minnesota and I see Michael, he still gets creeped out by what had happened. I will never truly know what happened, but I know that whatever it was that had my mother's voice, it was evil, and it was hungry. I was 14. It was an average night, around 9 p.m. Me and my little cousin were at his house. I was babysitting for the night while my mom and aunt were shopping, and my dad and uncle were watching the game at their friend's house. So there we were, sitting in the living room, the TV casting a soft glow in the dimly lit room. But something wasn't right. I couldn't shake off the feeling of unease that settled like a heavy fog in the pit of my stomach. I glanced at my cousin, who was engrossed in a cartoon, oblivious to the tension coiling in the air. I got up, pretending to stretch, and made my way to the back door to lock it. As I turned to head back, my heart stopped. There, in the kitchen window, stood a figure. A decrepit and homeless-looking man, his eyes fixed on my little cousin with a chilling intensity. My protective instincts kicked in. I didn't want to alarm my cousin, so I casually suggested that we go upstairs to get ready for bed before our parents returned. I tucked him into bed, my mind racing with fear and uncertainty. I knew there was a man outside who shouldn't be there, and I needed to protect us. I dashed downstairs and into the kitchen, grabbing a meat tenderizing hammer from the drawer. I scanned the window where I had seen the man, but he was gone. I hurried to the front door, double-checking that it was locked securely. With trembling hands, I ran back upstairs to my cousin's room and positioned myself in front of the door, clutching the hammer tightly. I called the police and then my dad and uncle, praying for them to hurry back. The cops were half an hour away, and my dad and uncle were even farther. Then it happened. The unmistakable sound of glass shattering echoed through the house, followed by the heavy thud of boots on the wooden floor below. My heart pounded in my chest as I whispered to my cousin to stay calm and hide under the covers, his small form trembling with fear. I could hear him, the intruder, prowling around downstairs, his footsteps sending shivers down my spine. I gripped the meat tenderizer until my knuckles turned white, my senses on high alert as I waited for him to make his move. Minutes felt like hours as the silence stretched on, broken only by the occasional creak of the floorboards beneath his weight. Then, dread washed over me as I heard the sound of footsteps ascending the stairs. My breath caught in my throat as he reached the top, his heavy boots thudding against the floor with each step. I prayed silently, desperately, for the police to arrive, for my dad and uncle to burst through the door and save us from whatever horror awaited on the other side. He moved from room to room, his presence a looming shadow in the darkness, until finally, mercifully, he disappeared downstairs again, the door to the basement creaking open and then closing with a finality that sent chills down my spine. 15 agonizing minutes later, the police arrived, their sirens piercing through the night as they burst into the house, guns drawn. It turned out that the man outside was an escapee from a mental hospital one state away, a dangerous fugitive with a history of violence. As they led him away in handcuffs, I couldn't shake the feeling of terror that had gripped me, the fear that had consumed me as I stood guard over my cousin, ready to do whatever it took to keep him safe. The night was over, but the memory of those harrowing hours would haunt me forever, a reminder of the darkness that lurked just beyond the safety of our own front door. The memory still haunts me even after all these years. It was a chilly evening in Brooklyn. I must have been around 9 or 10 years old at the time. My dad was picking my mom up from work, so I was left alone. It must have been around 7:30 p.m. and it was already getting dark outside. I remember sitting in the living room watching TV. I was engrossed in some cartoon when I heard a heavy thump coming from upstairs. At first, I dismissed it as just another quirk of our old house. It was known for its creaks, squeaks, and plumbing noises, especially at night. Eventually, I went to the bottom of the stairs and called out, "Who's up there?" The banging and strange noises continued, so I called 911. Within minutes, 2 police officers arrived at our doorstep. They listened patiently as I recounted what had happened, their expressions grave as they exchanged a silent glance. Without a word, they made their way upstairs, guns drawn, and opened every door and turned on every light in the house. They came down and told me that nobody was up there and it was probably just a neighbor in the adjacent home making noise. They said that I did the right thing by calling 911 as it's better to be safe than sorry and that I wasn't in any trouble. Just then the sound of car doors slamming outside announced my parents' arrival. They rushed inside as the 2 officers were consoling me. I recounted the events of the evening in a shaky voice, my parents' expressions growing increasingly alarmed as I spoke. But as the officers assured them that everything was under control and we all shared a nervous laugh, then settled back into the comfort of our home. The next day, my dad made a chilling discovery. A ladder propped up against the second-floor window of the guest bedroom and 2 rolls of electric tape discarded in the backyard. It was then that the true horror of what could have happened that night sank in.